Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Now, Debbie and Neo don't seem to be available. I haven't heard from them one way or another, so I'm going to kind of assume that they're not going to be able to join us this week, which is okay. You know, everybody gets a day off from now and again from time to time. But my guest today is actually kind of flashing me back to the year 2007 when I first saw the movie The Secret, because his brother, Bill Harris, was one of the presenters in that movie. And I remember his part well because he was telling the story about a homosexual man who Bill was coaching at the time and helping him to get past all his stuff about being a homosexual. And of course, that was an important theme that got played out in the movie. So that was certainly a formative time for me. I know it was for many other people who have been influenced by that movie over the years. We have had a guest or two in the past, so it's nice to add a third person here who is connected to the movie, and his name is Michael Harris. And Michael, first of all, thank you for joining me today. How you doing?
I'm doing really great, and I was thinking about your opening, the Daily Dose of Happy, and I keep this on my desk always to remind me.
Keep smiling.
Keep smiling. And it's just always sitting here. You know, we spend so much time on Zoom. And, you know, hours and hours and hours some days. And I just have to remember that. So I like the Daily Dose of Happy that you got.
Yeah, that's a theme that's been going on now for about, I'm going to say 5 to 6 years of the show. And I realized, I started the show 10 years ago, and I started it mainly because I didn't fully understand what The Secret was teaching me. I couldn't quite make sense of the whole thing. On top of that, my business had crashed with the 2008 financial crisis. My wife's business had also crashed, so we were completely wiped out. And by 2012, we were deep in debt. The savings is gone, you know, and I'm like struggling to survive and trying to figure out why it is that what I was taught all my life wasn't working. So I said, well, I'll start a podcast. I'll bring on experts that can teach me this stuff, and that way I can get through this. So that was the impetus behind it. But after a few hundred episodes of talking about law of attraction, you say, well, what else do we talk about? We've kind of covered it at this point. So and that's when it expanded into your Daily Dose of Happy, because especially in the movie The Secret, what does Rhonda do at the very end? She goes to a beach and she writes the words "feel good" in the sand. And so and by that point, I'd also become aware of Abraham Hicks and the teachings that they put out. And one of their key teachings is you just want to get your vibration high. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means you got to feel good. So feel good. Just do everything it takes to feel good. So I figured, well, let's make the whole show just about feeling good. Your Daily Dose of Happy. So that's where that comes from.
Well, that's great. And I like that idea of what you mentioned about starting the show. And it was really about exploring the law of attraction. And where's the book? You know, Napoleon Hill, this book, Think and Grow Rich, was written with the idea that he was going to go out and explore really, you know, all these people and kind of as an investigative reporter in a way and put that book together. So perhaps, Walt, you've got a book in you with all these shows you're doing. You can put it all together. LOA Today, how my guest and I have discovered, you know, new secrets about Think and Grow Rich, or whatever you want to call it. You know?
I love it. Well, actually, it's kind of appropriate because not only was The Secret a bit confusing to me, but Think and Grow Rich was confusing to me. Now, I read that back in the 1980s, but I remember vividly, I don't remember exactly which chapter it is, but in one of the chapters, he says something to the effect that if you grasp what it is that I'm trying to say here, I don't need to explain it to you. And my response was, I don't get it. You got to explain it to me.
Well, I'm still working on that too. And I got to tell you, every day for 10 minutes, I've got the audio version of the book as well. But for every day for 10 minutes, I set my 10-minute timer on my audio book and listen to Think and Grow Rich. And I've done that for the last couple of years. So I've been through the book a couple of times, but it's just 10 minutes every day.
Good,
and it's like, I mean, you know, Bob Proctor. So there's a picture of my, it's Bob, Mary Morrissey, Peggy McCall, and Gay Hendricks and myself. And Bob, you know, while he was alive, kept, you know, one of the original Think and Grow Rich, you know, in his pocket.
Oh, did he? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, he always had it there with him, no matter what.
Uh-huh.
And so he could whip it out. And of course, he knew every word and every comma in the book, probably better than just about anybody else. There's one other person in the States that's really good with it too. But you know, we have to be reminded. It's like a shower. We have to take a shower every day because we get dirty. And it's like with this idea of law of attraction, you know, and really living this vibrant life, we have to practice it every day. We have to remind ourselves. And that's why I keep listening to the audiobook every day.
Yeah, it's true. It's really true because we live in a society that doesn't really encourage that manner of thinking. As a
No,
matter of
not
fact,
at all.
It kind of works against it.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have the teaching and then we go out and live for a while and like, oh, wait a minute, there's the teaching. Oh, and the way we live for a while. It's like a push me, pull you really. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So it's no wonder we need the reinforcement because we're constantly exposed to the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, I get a lot out of nature and I live at 3,700 feet in Central Oregon and I'm in the mountains a lot and I go up buttes and I'm mostly off trail. We like to say trails are for tourists, you know, my buddy of mine and I. And so we just find these places that people don't go and go climb ridges and all these things. But I've discovered so much about being out there and, you know, even like the law of attraction, you know, you've got a flower in the middle of the woods and it's got to attract a bee.
Yeah.
To keep living, to regenerate the next year and the next year and the next year and the next year. So there's so many different examples of that in nature. And Think and Grow Rich, the book addresses, you know, the aspect of nature too in living your life. The book isn't about making a ton of money. It's about what I heard you say too, you know, about a daily dose of happiness, of smiling, you know, feeling good will help us attract those good things in our life. You know, we're bombarded with so many things, right?
No kidding.
You know, and I mentioned to you, in an email I sent you that this week, you know, it's been an interesting week because I got hacked on Sunday.
Ooh.
You know, they went into my Facebook, they put porn on my profile, my business page, they went into the ad account and grabbed some credit cards and hit some banks and, you know, so I've been dealing this week and most of this morning with all of that, you know, police reports and fraud reports with the banks and the credit cards and all this stuff. And I thought, well, should I mention this on, you know, the Law of Attraction podcast I'm on?
Sure, right? Of course. That's part of life.
It's absolutely, you know, it's like feng shui. Feng shui is there to help us adjust what's going on in our lives to make our lives better. And this idea of law of attraction, you know, these things happen, you know, hacking happens. I've never had this particular type of hacking happen, but, you know, what do I do about it? I'm not responsible for what that other person is doing, but I'm responsible about how I handle it.
Yes.
You know, am I going to worry about it? It's going to be okay. You know, they're not going to end up getting any money. It's more of a business hassle and dealing with some of that and websites and, you know, making sure they're all secure. But that's what I can do. You know, if I walk or if an alligator comes up and tries to bite me, that's an alligator. That's their nature, right? Nothing I can do about it. They bite. Dogs bark. Bees sting. You know, hackers hack. So what do I have to do? I have to learn to, you know, step aside, get away, and not allow the hacker to get me, not allow the alligator to bite me, not to allow the rattlesnake to bite me. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And when you do that, you ultimately end up with an interesting shield that goes along with it. Because the attitude that you're describing is one that not only helps you when the alligator is trying to attack, but it also helps you when you're trying to stay away from other alligators.
Yeah. And there's all sorts of alligators out there.
There are. A bunch of them.
Yeah. You know, and it's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I noticed some, animal scat out by my front door and there was a bunch of hair in it. And we don't get a lot of coyotes around here, but I suspect it was coyote, right? And there's been some rabbits around here.
Michael, I'm going to let you tell the story. I'm going to mute myself while you're telling the story because I have a cat that's desperate to get away from the coyotes. So I'll be with you in 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, to continue with that story is, I have this coyote scat there, and there was a bunch of hair in it. And a couple of the local rabbits that were here disappeared. So I suspected that the coyote ate those rabbits. Well, the rabbit wasn't responsible for the coyote, right? The rabbit tried to get away, I'm sure, right? And the coyote was attracting the rabbit for food because that's what he wanted. Again, it's the nature of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how do we, again, coming back to that idea again, how do we live our lives when it's the nature of things to eat and be eaten, so to speak?
It's one of the interesting, what's the adjective that I want to use? Conundrum? Isn't really, kind
Dynamic?
of. Dynamic? Yeah, okay. Dynamic, that would be good. One of the interesting dynamics of living in this world that we live in, it's often described as a world of polarity or of contrast. And there are a couple of pieces to it that I find to be interesting. The first one being that we came here in the first place. Yeah. And there's a lot of theories about that, a lot of belief systems about that. I kind of lean toward the one that says I played a role in that decision. There's the other part of my mind that says, what on earth was I thinking when I did that? But nevertheless, I have to, mea culpa. Okay. Yeah, I probably did make that decision. Yeah. Not sure why or not sure how, but nevertheless, my point is we did actually choose to come here.
Yeah.
So if we choose to come here, what does that mean? Well, it means we choose to live in that contrast.
Yeah.
We choose to live in that polarity. And that's an interesting dynamic right there. Because on the one hand, we want to have the abundant life where everything is just feeling really great and wonderful. And on the other hand, we came here deliberately into a life that we knew was going to be full of contrast and polarity.
Yep. Yeah. And that contrast and polarity is interesting because, like, you look at yin and yang and you look at their symbols, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's got the two sides, but it's also got the side where it connects, right down the middle. It connects the two sides. So it's like that dynamic, that polarity. Perhaps part of what we're trying to do is connect the two sides. The yin and the yang. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Well, I think there's truth to that because, we could describe the yin and the yang or the high and the low, the good and the bad, however you want to label it, as the dark and the light. And if you look at it that way, well, you really can't have an understanding of light without dark. You really can't have an understanding of dark without light. So of course they have to go together.
Yeah. And I think there's a misperception about the dark. And oftentimes the dark is labeled as bad or some verbiage along that line. Yet,
understandably.
No tree, no plant that I know of. Well, maybe a few exceptions in the jungle, but a plant starts with the seed that's in the ground that's in the dark.
Right.
So the roots are growing in the dark, and then eventually it breaks through the surface of the ground into the light. And it connects the two. You've got the ground here, you got the darkness here and the light up here, and that plant's connecting light and dark.
That's right.
So is the dark bad?
I think the dark is a perception and the light is a perception.
Yeah.
Because, first of all, I don't know many plants that begin with the roots underneath the ground that have eyes to be able to see the darkness. So, if you can't perceive that there's a darkness versus a light, what's the difference? Who cares?
Yeah. And then look at what's behind you, the universe and the stars in the dark, and you can't see the light if it wasn't for the dark there.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I put that back there to remind myself that the universe has my back. That's my way of expressing it.
I like that.
Yeah. No, that's deliberate. That's intentional.
Yeah.
That way, every time I'm doing a show, I can just see my background. Oh, yep. The universe has my back.
Okay. There it is. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
The whole thing about contrast too also reminds me, like you said, dark is often perceived as being negative, but the key word there is perceived.
Right.
It's a selection. And it's understandable that so many things that we don't like happen in darkness. They happen in the dark areas of life.
Yep.
So quite understandable. But by the same token, part of the challenge, and this is something I've only begun to really appreciate in the last few years, part of the challenge is learning to appreciate that dark to feel
Absolutely.
good about it, to say, there's some cool stuff going on with that dark.
Yeah.
That's
And,
hard. Let's be honest. That's really hard.
yeah. But, when you go to bed at night, you turn off the light.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the dark. It may not be pitch black in your home, but, I can't sleep. It's too light out.
Well, especially in my house, because I have black cats, and if I don't have lights on at the floor level, I'll just trip on them at night, and that's not a good thing. Let me tell you, a cat yelping in the middle of the night is not a happy sound.
Yeah. When you accidentally kick one or step on one.
So you want the light to be on the floor level, little night lights, just so that you can make sure you see them. Oh, hey, Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there again, that's another way of appreciating the light.
Yeah.
In a place where you would normally want the dark.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this whole light and dark stuff is pretty wild. This whole thing.
Yeah. Again, and there's that connecting point, the dusk and the dawn.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Something else that this brings to my mind too. The book Think and Grow Rich is what we were talking about that kind of brought us into this whole idea of the contrast and polarity. And when I think about that book, first of all, I think about a time roughly, I'm going to say 6 years ago, when my co-host at the time, Joel Elston, and I did the entire book page by page. So we did it over a course of about, I think it was like 12, 13, 14 episodes, something like that. And we went through it in detail, and I'll never forget this. There was one chapter we got to, he said, we don't really want to do this chapter. There's no point to it. We're going to skip it. And I'm curious to know what you think about it, because the chapter was about transmuting sexual energy.
And
we were thinking like, okay, well, do we really want to bring that in? Is that really useful to the conversation we were having? And we decided that it wasn't. But as I think back, I wonder, well, there must have been somebody who found value in that, because otherwise he wouldn't have put it in the book in the first place.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about that chapter?
Well, I've had, especially listening to it, as I've listened to it, I've heard it differently than reading it. Well, the whole book, it's just like I heard things, even though I've read the book, 15 times or something. As soon as I started listening to the audio version, I heard different things. Even I would follow along and read it sometimes as the audio was going on, and I would still hear it differently.
Interesting.
And I've been practicing yoga for 35 years and teaching for 30 plus years. And so I've really experienced, this internal energy a lot in a different way as a result of that. And when I look at the book and the sexual transmutation and all that stuff, I consider really the life force energy.
Okay.
Right. And that what I'm hearing when I literally hearing the book is that sexual energy is our life force. It's the universe. It's God. It's whatever you want to call it. And it's learning that the sexual part of it, there's the internal part of it, and then there's the physical part of it. So you're connecting really the two, right? That internal sexual energy that we can feel inside, and we can get, when we're with our partner, we start to get excited and, all these different things, and we feel the energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then it manifests itself physically by the physical action that we're doing to connect.
Right.
And then the sexual act and making love and all of that. So I've really come to a place, again, to where I kind of connect those two, if that makes sense at all.
You took it further than we did. I mean, literally, our response was, okay, you transmute sexual energy. What do you want to say about that? I don't know. Okay, well, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You took it further. Congratulations. I think that's great.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know, again, through my yoga practice and such, and the years that I've been doing that, and I haven't done a lot of Kundalini yoga, but a lot of Kundalini, there's a little bit of difference in the way that you experience the energy and the way that the energy is revealed in our bodies. But it's quite a fascinating exploration to experience that energy. And like I started yoga because of physical reasons, but now the physical reasons don't really matter. You know, they're there. It's there's physical outcomes to the practice, but it's the internal feeling that I have, and it's the practice of really stilling the mind. You know, there's some meditative qualities to it. And, you know, as you're moving your body, this body structure, you know, in each posture is a little bit different. So you may feel it more in your shoulder or your hip or your knee or your liver or your neck or whatever. So you're feeling these different sensations in different parts of the body. And for me, it's learning how to keep my mind and my breath calm as those different sensations are happening, those different physical sensations, if this makes sense. And then that's mirrored in my everyday life. As I get up and I walk and I relate to friends and family and I go to the coffee shop and I get cut off in traffic and all these different things, can I allow my mind to be calm and still when all those things are happening?
Do you have any particularly favorite techniques that you use to accomplish that, or is it just the training that comes from doing the yoga? What's your particular approach for making sure you stay in that appreciative space?
Well, it starts with the breath. Is in the practice that I do, and I primarily do Bikram yoga, which is the hot yoga. And I actually trained with Bikram in 98. I was one of the original teachers. And then I did about 30 teacher trainings where I taught or led the training, and probably helped train 6,000 or 7,000 teachers, owned a couple of studios and all of that. So, and then today I don't own a studio. I sold them, but I teach 6 to 10 times a month. So my practice today is to go into the hot room and practice in the hot room, which is really reflective of the way India is. So when Bikram came to the States, he was wondering why we would practice yoga in a cold room or an unheated room. Because like in Kolkata, you know, it's warm and it's humid. And if you've been there or any of the listeners have been there, it's sweaty even in the air conditioning, right? And there are some definite benefits from that heat. So I'm in the heat, I'm teaching or I'm practicing or whatever. And it's just like this total flush of the mind and the body. It's like when I go in today, it's to clear the mind. It's to calm the mind. It's to come back to a place to where I have a new whiteboard. You know, like if I go practice in the middle of the day and it's been a particularly busy day, I want to wipe my slate clean. I want to wipe my mind clean, right, for the afternoon and for the evening. So that practice gives me the ability to do that.
Okay. Yeah. So when you say you want to wipe your mind clean, I'm guessing that what you mean is you want to clear your mind of all the junk that you really would rather not give your attention to, but you have these repetitions going on that are kind of drawing you into them.
Well, I think it's both sides. It's everything. It's not just the junk. I mean, definitely it's the junk. You know, definitely it's like the hack, so to speak, right? Those things. But one of the things that I discovered over the years is when I went to Bikram, I was still recovering after years of some health issues. And in the 80s and 86, they were going to cut off my legs, 1986. Wow. I had peripheral vascular disease. My right leg was 100% blocked. My left leg was 65% blocked.
Wow.
And it's how I started my yoga practice. I never had thought about it before that, but that was within the midst of that is when I started my practice. And then I went to Bikram in 98, not to become a teacher, but to heal my body. And I got in an argument with him.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I got there and I said, well, Bikram, you know, my legs still hurt. You know, this is, 12 years after my surgeries, almost 12 years after my surgeries. And I was still carrying pain. And I said, what do I do to modify? And he said, Michael, no modification. Modification not allowed. I said, what do you mean? He says, do what you can according to your ability. And one more thing, don't worry about it. Forget about it. Just do the yoga. And that applies directly to law of attraction. Don't worry about it. Forget about it. Be happy. Keep smiling. Right? Now, that ended up, in hindsight, I looked at it at one point and go, wow, that's the biggest lesson I've ever learned in yoga. It wasn't how to do the best breath or how to do the best bow pose or anything else. It was learning to calm the mind, to stop worrying. Don't worry about it. Forget about it. And an interesting thing is I started connecting the dots, and I'm going to go back to, it's really 87, where a doctor said, get up and walk. And he told me the same thing. Don't worry about it. Just get up and walk. When I couldn't walk, when I was on a cane, he says, just start walking. And he says, you will build new blood vessels in your legs and you will overcome your claudication. Again, don't worry about it.
There's an advanced doctor, especially for that time.
Right. But there are other doctors, those of you that know who Dr. John Sarno is. John Sarno was brilliant. He said the same thing. Nothing is wrong with you. Just get up and live your life. Don't worry about it. Forget about it. Right? Yeah. Abraham Hicks, Abraham and Esther, they say the same thing. Don't worry about it. Live your life. Have a good life. Be happy.
Yeah.
So I started connecting these dots from different places. I have a friend, Tommy Baylor, and Tommy, some of you may have heard him. He wrote the Michael Jackson song, She's Out of My Life, and was Michael Jackson's voice producer for all of Michael's career, and ran Radio City Music Hall and a bunch of stuff, worked with Quincy a lot. And I mentioned this because I grabbed one of his books, or actually two of his books off my shelf. One is What You Want Wants You, which is kind of a hidden gem if anybody hasn't read that yet. And the other thing is this book, Anything is Possible. You can see I dog ear everything.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, you got a few bookmarks there.
Yeah. But he says the same thing. Don't worry about it. Live your life. And again, coming back to the law of attraction and this idea of what you want wants you. When we are in alignment, I believe that we're getting messages about these things that want us, that want to work through us, that want us to deliver certain ideas and thoughts or do certain things. And when we are in alignment with that, I believe we're in alignment with the law of attraction.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah.
It's interesting though how this whole concept of law of attraction or energy, there's a lot of different ways we can label it, describe it, and understand it. But the thing that fascinates me is how simple the whole thing is and how we have such a hard time buying into it. I mean, I've been talking about this topic for 10 years here on the show. You've been talking about it, I'm sure, since, The Secret and before, Think and Grow Rich. It's so simple. Why is it so difficult? It's just amazing.
Well, and, I mentioned to you too about this idea that, everyday law of attraction. And, I've done some talks and webinars and such on this idea. And one of the examples that I like to use, I tend to be plant-based, but it doesn't really matter, what somebody eats. But the law of attraction to me works like this. I can be sitting here right now, Walt, and thinking, I want to have a tofu veggie rice bowl with yum sauce on it for dinner, right? And I think, okay, what ingredients do I need? Well, I need rice, I need tofu, I need, broccoli, green beans, whatever different veggies I want.
Sure.
So I go down to the store and I got this vision in my mind and I attract, the rice. It's all available to me at the store, right? It's already been placed in front of me.
Right.
And I go around the grocery store, pick up my items. I go through the check stand. I exchange money, karma,
Mm-hmm.
for what I've just done. I've taken action to get what I just wanted. I go home, I put these ingredients together, and then on my table is this veggie rice bowl that maybe just a couple hours earlier I was envisioning, and then I tracked it, everything I needed to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
We do that all the time.
Continuously.
Oh, I want to go drive up into the mountains. Okay, so what ingredients do I need? I need my car, I need gas, I need these different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get all those things together and do that. John Assaraf, when he talks about The Secret, a lot of people throw rocks at The Secret, which is great. Because, people thought that if you sat on your couch, Aunt Mabel would drop $10 million on you one day. Right? It's probably not going to happen. You might get
if you wait long enough,
if you wait long enough.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And assuming you even have an Aunt Mabel.
This also would help, yes.
Yeah. But, John came up with the idea about the law of Goya. And the law of Goya is get off your ass. You actually got to do something to take action. Mm-hmm. So like that veggie rice bowl, I could sit here all day long dreaming of a veggie rice bowl, tasting it in my mouth, my saliva. But unless I take action, I'm not going to attract it, and I'm not going to be able to enjoy in the fruits of it.
It's one of the interesting complaints about The Secret.
Yeah.
I think you really nailed it. The Secret doesn't actually encourage you to take action. Actually, it does.
It does.
There's really only one segment in the entire movie that doesn't require it. All the rest of them do. But because there's that one segment, and it's the segment where the kid wants to attract the bicycle.
Yeah.
And his grandfather ends up delivering the bicycle to him. He doesn't actually do anything. And because of that one segment, people have drawn this line that says, well, The Secret doesn't do anything about teaching you to take action. Like, wait a minute, did you see the rest of the movie?
Yeah. Yeah, but that little kid still stated what he wanted.
He did. Yep.
And his father fulfilled that wish that he had.
Oh yeah. But that's the basis for the objection, that they don't tell you in the movie to take action because the kid didn't actually take any action. As if there's something wrong with that. That's the part that really gets me. There's something wrong that the kid didn't take action. Oh my God, he should be ashamed of himself. No, he's not a kid, for goodness sake. Come on, give him a break. Yeah.
And another part of here's, the copy of The Secret.
There you go.
James Arthur Ray in this book talks about Aladdin and the story of Aladdin.
Yeah. Right.
And the story of Aladdin says that you have 3 wishes. And, imagine this little kid telling his dad, I want a bike, I want a wagon, and I want a squirt gun. And then dad saying, well, okay, you've got your 3 wishes in life, you can't have any more. Right? What James reminds us in the book is that we have as many wishes as we want. We are not limited to the 3 wishes in the story of Aladdin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, the law of attraction reminds us of that,
In fact, actually, that was one of the phenomena that helped really reinforce for me just how real the law of attraction is.
Yeah.
Because I began to notice that there would be instances where I would either consciously or unconsciously ask for something. And then I'd get it, and then I'd get another variation on it, and then I'd get another variation after that, and another one after that. And it began to dawn on me. It's like, you missed the bus. Wait 10 minutes, there's another one coming.
Yeah.
It doesn't just deliver once. It's not one and done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is really interesting and quite a phenomenon all by itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of my co-hosts, who does the Monday show with me, I do the show 5 days a week. His name is Louis D'Souza. And listeners know who he is, of course. He has a daughter he has 2 daughters, actually. And the second daughter wanted a bicycle, just like the kid in the movie. Uh-huh. And Louis is the ultimate law of attraction teacher parent. He insists that they just, learn how the law of attraction works and just make the life that they want. He doesn't solve their problems for them. He's like, here's how it works. I'm just going to teach you. You go do it.
Yeah.
His daughter manifested not 1, but 3 bicycles within a 3-month period.
Yeah.
Talk about abundance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I hope they were all working bicycles.
They actually all were working bicycles. I believe two of them were secondhand that a family had, donated or given up or whatever. And there was a third. I don't remember what the third one was, but she basically had her pick. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. She could go with whichever one she wanted.
Yeah.
And he says it's really fun when you teach your kids how this stuff works to watch them as they learn it.
Yeah. It opens their eyes a lot. Right? And it's going, oh, wow, I didn't know I could do that.
Yeah.
So they start to, sometimes as kids, or not sometimes, most of the time as kids, we believe in magic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And as we grow up, we're told that magic doesn't really exist as such.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not true. The law of attraction, teaches us that magic is alive and well. And I don't mean deception. I mean the magical part of life as it unfolds.
I agree with that. As a matter of fact, I would even add that the people who complain that magic doesn't exist are people who don't understand what magic is.
Right.
The reason they don't understand what magic is they've never heard any teachings that explain how to truly understand the concept of magic. I can't remember who it was. It was a technologist who came up with this phrase, but he said that any sufficiently advanced form of science is magic because you don't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. For some reason, this is coming up, and it might be a good place to mention this. Most people know who Steve Jobs is.
I would think, yes.
Yeah.
Well, anybody who has a phone in their pocket likely knows.
And iPhone, yeah. But most people have no idea how the iPhone came about.
That's true, yeah.
And who Steve Jobs really, the way that he lived his life. And
he had quite a life.
He had quite a life.
Yeah.
He read a book called The Autobiography of a Yogi.
Mm-hmm.
Over and over and over again. Reportedly, it was the only book on his iPad was Autobiography of a Yogi.
Is that right? Well, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, when he died, he gave everybody, he didn't, he had boxes of them, but at the service, everybody at the service got a copy of the Autobiography of a Yogi.
Oh, okay.
Right? Everybody. So what does this have to do with the iPhone? Well, as he dived into the book and as he started diving into the idea of Kriya Yoga and studying Kriya Yoga and starting to meditate, he got the idea of the iPhone through that practice, through the practice of meditation and Kriya Yoga. And it was like, you could go back to what you want you. So it was something that was, kept coming at Steve. And through the meditation, he finally realized that what they were trying to tell them was to create this thing called an iPhone, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is called the law of attraction.
It is.
Right? And so through that practice and through that meditation, he created something that changed the world.
Yes.
Right? Literally changed the world in so many different ways.
And changed the way we interact with the world as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you take somebody's phone away, you might as well have, cut their right arm off these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Although I did leave home the other day and I forgot it and I went, no, I don't need it.
But it's really odd because 20 years ago it didn't exist.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really remarkable.
Yeah. And then when he got fired, I can't remember his name now, the guy that took over, brought, Steve didn't believe in having very many products. He had like 10 products max.
Right.
And then it went up to 100 and then they weren't doing very well. So they hired Steve back and Steve brought it back down to 10 core products again, including the iPhone.
Right.
Let's focus on this one thing,
Yeah, the gentleman you're thinking of is John Scully, who is originally from PepsiCo. Yeah. And, I don't think John Scully really got computers. I don't think he really ever grasped what that was all about. Yeah. He knew how to run a Pepsi-Cola corporation, but that was about it.
Well, the story of, Coca-Cola, it's a fabulous story, where, somebody came along and they bought the recipe and there was this, the way that it was described in the early 1900s, how it came about Coca-Cola has probably created just about more millionaires than anything else in the world. And it was a simple recipe that came about.
Yeah.
But the truckers, the distributors, the company, the executives, you add it all up, and a lot of people made money off that black pot of Coca-Cola.
It's true. It's very true. Yeah. It's interesting how one idea can have such a major impact, and how it can be so difficult to predict in advance that idea is going to have an impact.
Yeah.
People come up with, really interesting ideas all the time. How often can you say that, oh yeah, that I can tell that one's going to take over the world, and you're right. You know?
Yeah. And the thing about it is, I think that, we're having ideas coming at us all the time, right? And those ideas that I'm picking up on, maybe you are too, maybe some of the listeners, they're picking up on it too.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I got an idea, somebody in Australia has the same idea, and we're both running it at the same time. That happens all the time. But we get these ideas, and they're either going to get planted in us or they're not. It's kind of like the pine cones that are dropping off the tree. Some of those pine cones are going to, go into seed and sprout and grow new trees. The rest of them aren't. The rest of the ideas are going to go away and die. So as these ideas come to us, are we going to grasp a hold of one of them and really run with it?
And speaking as somebody who's in the midst of a project where I'm doing exactly that, I can tell you there's not a whole lot of comfort in it.
Right.
There's not a lot of confidence in it. You're kind of just going by the seat of your pants and saying, well, I don't know. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going to happen here.
Yeah. And it continues to happen. I mean, even for those of you out there that know Russell Brunson at ClickFunnels, he had this idea, it was a potato gun initially when, he first started selling stuff online. It was a potato gun, and he had no idea that it was going to turn into this ClickFunnels, which is worth a lot of money these days. But this idea was planted, and he started doing it, and he learned, and he kept developing it, and he focused on that one thing.
Yes.
And for those that work with him, if you're going to work with him, part of the agreement is you're going to focus on one thing. You can't sell 5 different products. You focus on one thing. And then you grow that one thing into whatever it's intended to grow into. And so I believe, that's another example of how the law of attraction works in everyday life. It's happening all around us.
When you say you believe that's an example of how it works in everyday life, the it that you're referring to is the focus. The focus. On one single thing.
Yeah.
Because what you're really doing essentially in that place is, the law of attraction is always playing in every area of your life, but by focusing, you are focusing its power in that one way. And by focusing in that one way, you're enhancing that one way continuously, building the vibration of it, to use the phrase we use.
Yeah. A acorn or a tomato seed, when it's planted in the ground, it doesn't think while it's in the ground, well, should I be a tomato or corn? Right? If it doesn't grow very well if it tries to solve the problem that way. Right. Yeah. But, he can see the corn, kind of close by him, and, maybe the next row in the garden. He goes, well, maybe I want to be corn. If he thinks long enough, he'll probably die, but he's got to be the tomato.
Yeah.
Even the alligator, the hacker knows no other thing. That's what they do. Again, alligators bite.
It's an interesting question in there, though. And that is, we are humans, but we are also, I like to think of us as segments of God energy or source energy. Mm-hmm. So we are all creators, every single one of us. And in our roles as creators, we do have the capacity and the capability to recreate ourselves. Yeah. So the hacker can recreate himself as something else if he chooses to.
Yeah.
To me, the real the key element in there is the word choose.
Yeah. And, that's something, even for myself, I mentioned my legs and my peripheral vascular disease. At 12 years old, I had a water skiing accident, and they ended up taking 60% of my liver, gallbladder, cracked rib, collapsed lung, 21 blood transfusions, and had a near-death experience and came back, and I didn't want to come back. I'm making kind of a longer story a little bit shorter, but when I came back, I started getting resentments towards God.
Really
towards the universe. And it's because I didn't want to come back. I wanted to be where I was.
Yeah.
And then I started drinking and doing all those different things and partying and having all this life. And then I had my peripheral vascular disease happen and started triggering this idea that maybe I wanted to create a new life. So, I'm 63 years old, and, I've now been sober since 30. So for 33 years. So I came to a point, and this is directly what I heard you say a moment ago, of making that choice to live a different life.
Yeah.
To start to get this idea of law of attraction, to start to get this idea of surrendering to the universe and, to what my personal beliefs are with God and everything else. And that just evolved. And even though I was supposed to be dead multiple times, even though, I drank and I used way too much and went through all that experience, here I am alive today, right? And so that hacker can make that decision too, or anybody else for that matter.
It's true.
Can make that decision that if something isn't working, well, for hackers, some of it's working because they make a lot of money hacking, but it doesn't justify what they do. Right? They may end up in jail because of it. And then they go, oh, I want a different life. Or just not even that extreme, just somebody that's maybe listening today that's maybe struggling with life or adversity, and adversity is normal, but it's what do we do with it? Are we ready to make that decision to start to attract what we really want in our life, not just what we don't want in our life?
And that in and of itself is a challenge.
Yeah.
Because when we're in the midst of whatever it is that we're dealing with, that adversity, that really difficult situation, we are constantly presented with it over and over and over and over again. Yeah. And it can be tough when you're constantly being presented and you're experiencing the negative consequences of it and all that stuff. It can be really tough to refocus your mind.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
But it's also a cool one because when you finally learn to do it, I remember the first time that I realized in a very, very small way, I actually could do that. I could actually refocus my mind in the face of the adversity. Yeah. It was a bit of a shock, to be honest. Yeah. It was a bit of a shock. It was a surprise. And there was actually a little piece of my mind that said, yeah, did I really do that? I'm not so sure I did.
Well, have you heard of the Maybe story?
I have not heard that name.
Do you know what that is?
I do not.
You may know the story. It's pretty short, but it's, a farmer has a horse, and the horse goes off.
Oh, I know which story you're talking about. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And the neighbor says, well, it's too bad your horse ran away. Well, maybe not. And then the next day comes back with 7 horses.
Right.
Right. And then the neighbor says, well, maybe that's good fortune. Well, maybe not. Well, his son is trying to break one of the horses to ride, falls off, breaks his leg. The neighbor goes, well, bad luck. Maybe not. Right. And then the next day, there's a war going on. And so they're out looking for people to go fight war. And because the kid had a broken leg, he couldn't go fight war. Well, good fortune again. So is that adversity really adversity? Even like my experience with drinking and all of that today, I get to use that particular story in my life as a potential way to help other people. But without that having happened, I can't tell that story.
That's true.
And so me just telling the story and then somebody else going, oh, you know what? I think I'm ready to get sober too, or I'm ready to start practicing the law of attraction. I want a different life. But the only way that I could get here was having that adversity.
That's a really important point. By the way, I know the story as the good luck, bad luck story, but it's the exact same story.
It's got different names. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that one. It's a great story. The thing that I think is most challenging about these situations where somebody, though they want to make that change, is appreciating exactly what you said, appreciating the value of all of that adversity.
Yeah.
And the example that I gave recently, I appeared on someone else's podcast with one of my other co-hosts. We had a great time. And in the course of doing that show, they raised this question about, how do you deal with adversity? And it was in the context of, who's been your best guest? Who's been your worst guest? All that kind of thing. And I said, actually there was only one time I had a guest on who I recorded the show and I didn't use it.
Really?
I've done over 1,800 episodes and only one I did not use. And the reason I didn't use it, well, there were two reasons why I didn't use it. The first one is that the guy who came onto the show, started ripping one of my co-hosts who was supposed to be there that day but couldn't. And he was ripping into something that she had written on her website without her being there to defend herself, which I didn't really take too kindly to.
Yeah.
But that was only part of the reason why I chose not to use it. The other reason I chose not to use it is because his story was about how he became a millionaire from a very young age on his first try. So he went through no adversity. Now, he would tell you he had to work real hard and all this other stuff. But compared to what most people go through, he really didn't have to go through any adversity at all.
Yeah.
And an interesting thing came out of that. What came out of it is that when he did an interview or when he, quote, coached somebody, unquote, what he would do constantly would be push their emotional buttons.
Yeah.
He was always looking to push the emotional hot buttons. Why? Because he had nothing else to fall back on. He had no personal experience with adversity. So he couldn't help them. I mean, if they wanted to know, how do I become a millionaire? His answer could be no more than, you just go do it.
Yeah.
Because that's all he really knew.
Yeah.
Whereas the person who's had to, drag their feet through the mud and, wipe the slime off and beaten down into the ground 1,000 times, they got so many stories they can tell, so many different ways they can help somebody who's being beaten up along the way.
Yeah.
They can totally identify with that person. They can actually help somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's most of the people that I know that have made really any money lost it all at one point. Before they learned that lesson and was able to go back out there and to generate more revenue for themselves and to be able to keep it. And, in a way it's almost like a farmer, you're farming and you might lose all your crops and then the next 5 years you have amazing crops. And you're able to bring some in and send some out, and it's like my first yoga studio. I started applying the principles of yoga to my business and realized that with the system that I was doing, that there were systems and subsystems, and that the breathing, the inhale was the revenue coming in and the exhale was the revenue going out. And that I needed to have both of those to have that flow.
Sure. Right?
And then if I just breathe, how long can you hold your breath?
A few
only
seconds.
for so long, right? So
Yeah,
if you just keep bringing this money in, there's no place to put it. You got to release it too. Those other people around you.
Otherwise, it isn't energy flowing. It's energy blocked.
Right. Exactly. So again, it's an example of how nature really teaches us how to live and how the law of attraction works.
Yeah, the lessons are all out there. It's just a question of being willing to see them, perceive them, maybe even perceive, since, you can be blind and you can still be able to perceive.
Oh,
so,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a question of which senses you're willing to use. Are you willing to use any of them?
Yeah. And are you willing to take action?
And are you willing to connect it within? That's the other thing I talked about my journey, about how, I crashed and burned, with the 2008 crisis, and I didn't understand why I was having so much trouble climbing out. Well, the main reason I was having so much trouble climbing out is I was looking outside for all my answers.
Oh.
I hadn't learned how to ask inside. I hadn't learned the value of it. I hadn't learned that there was actually any answer you could get inside. It wasn't an option on the table for me.
Yeah.
So I was constantly looking at, well, here's that circumstance that happened to me, and there's that circumstance that happened to me, and well, I'm just a victim in this whole thing. I'm a pawn. Like this is, and that's not a good mindset. That's a mindset that's going to lead you to more lack.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that that's how it worked.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I actively learned how to go inside that things started to improve. And there's a key element there too. They didn't improve instantaneously. It took time.
Yeah.
It took a lot of years, actually. I had to go through a lot of growth. I had to go through a lot of change.
Yeah. Well, that tomato plant doesn't pop out tomatoes as soon as it breaks ground.
That's true.
It takes a while. But look what you've done as a result of that. You've got this podcast, and you said you've done 1,800 interviews.
1,800 episodes, yeah.
Whoa, that's like phenomenal. And on this incredible exploration to not only get personal insight, but to help other people too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
like a cherry on top. That's really because I remember the first time that I realized I had listeners. I was kind of a shock, like, oh my God, there's someone listening to this.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, and it's lovely to have helped people in helping myself, because I literally was helping myself every step of the way. And then other people were benefiting from it. I thought, damn, that's a heck of a system.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Help yourself and you help others at the same time.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And
Very cool.
I think that's the thing about story as well is, when we tell our story and we start to get clear, because sometimes our story needs clarity and what's real and what's not, it helps other people too get clear on their story. And, this idea, I have this idea right now that stories are really important in today's world. And, with the ability that we have in our country to really say anything that we want, I won't get into politics and all that, but to be able to really say anything that we want, where other places in the world don't have that option. They could not have this discussion that we're having today without being thrown into jail, right? So I think it's even more important than ever for us to interact, to get our stories out, because there's going to be somebody that's listening to this and maybe listening right now that will make some decisions that will make their life better. And there's going to be people that like what you say, and there's going to be people that don't like what you say, and there's going to be people the same way with me. They're not going to like me, or they're going to like me. But as we get more voices out in the world and talk more with each other, I think we're going to make this world a better place.
Oh, I don't think it can do anything but get better.
Right.
I think it's the only possible outcome, actually.
It's the law of attraction.
It is law of attraction. And by the way, you're right. There are many places in the world where they don't feel the freedom to express what we do. But interestingly enough, they still can get the podcast.
Yeah.
And even though the restrictions may be in place in their country, just by hearing the podcast, it starts to shift things.
Yeah.
So talk about having an influence without being able to see what the influence is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely happening. It's happening all over the place.
Yeah. You take a look at COVID and, in some ways, it stopped everything. It separated people. Social distancing is really physical distancing is what they're talking about. Right. But at the same time, through Zoom and other ways, it brought the world together for people to be able to talk to people all around the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It established an entirely new social fabric that didn't really exist. I mean, it existed, but in a much smaller scale. Yeah. And now, people just take for granted that we can have these conversations with somebody from the other side of the planet. And it's just instantaneous. It's like, wow, how cool is this?
And it's, I don't have to hop on a plane and do all that stuff and meet somebody in Boston for a day and then fly home. I can call them on Zoom.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And as a result, speaking for myself, some of my best friends in the world are virtual.
Yeah.
I have more good virtual friends than I have local. I do.
I hear you. Yeah, absolutely.
And they've helped me through some great, and really often challenging times. So I totally appreciate every single one of them. Hey, Michael, I really appreciate your being here today too. I mean, seriously, this has been a wonderful conversation. I do want to touch on two things before we say goodbye. First one, for somebody who wants to learn more about you, learn about your services, the things that you do and so forth, how do they find you?
Well, I'll mention a couple of things, and I showed this to you earlier. We just released this book, Podmatch Guest Mastery. So if there's anybody out there that's listening that wants to discover how to get on podcasts, how to tell your story, how to talk about the law of attraction or marketing or birds or anything else that you want to talk about, I'd invite you to get this book. The other thing is this book, Falling Down, Getting Up, was a book that gets more into how I took adversity and came through it. And then one more book, The Expert Success Solutions. Those are my 3 books. And you can find me at michaelbharris.com. So if you just go to that website, and you can get free resources. We have a number of different videos and downloads and all that, really talking about how to get your story out, how to be, better storyteller, what stories to use, what length to use them on, how to attract podcast hosts, whatever it might be. But, even just getting your story out over dinner with a friend that you might not normally do can be really powerful. So you can go from there to going to my website and getting additional information and going as deep as that you want, according to what you need in your life right now, according to what you want to attract, the law of attraction.
And we'll make sure that we'll include in the show notes the link to the website so they can find that really easily. And that, of course, will guide them to everything else. Yeah. So so thank you very much for sharing that. The last thing I want to share with you, and this is particularly true for you, I like to make this a practice with every guest, and that is to thank you on behalf of people whom you will never meet, you'll never see, but who have been touched by what you have to say, by the teachings that you have to share, the stories you have to tell. Because we don't get enough appreciation for that, in my view. So I want to make sure that even though they can't necessarily talk to you, you're hearing and appreciating their appreciation for you. So on behalf of those people who you'll never meet, you'll never see, thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Walt.
And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.